bylaw 400.35 amendment, which is site-specific use for the fitness facility. And I believe that our planner, Mr. Craig Teal, is here with us and will be starting us off on this item.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Creasy, members of the council and senior administration. Bylaw 400.35 is back before council for third reading. Public hearing was held 2 weeks ago, and council gave second reading and postponed third reading to allow the collection of additional information and for consideration of possible amendments or proposals for amendments being brought forward by administration. Most of the RFD that you have in your package is well, a good portion of it is material that was presented at the public hearing. And I just briefly want to go through and highlight some of the new information that's different for council's consideration before highlighting the administration recommendation at this point. I will point out, Mayor Creasy, that with the public closed, there's no further public input in this at this stage. It's solely about administration providing additional information for council to be able to go and make a decision about third reading. The RFD, if you jump to page 5, you'll start to see some of the new materials. As I mentioned, the public hearing was held for the proposal on June 14th. We certainly heard from those that were opposed and those that were in favor, and also those that considered themselves affected. For those that were in favor of the proposal to amend the land use bylaw, they pointed to the ability to support a growing business, the ability to convert a property that's currently tax exempt to tax paying, and the ability to repurpose a building that was built for relatively large for a single function that is difficult sometimes to accommodate other functions. For those who opposed, they raised concerns around traffic and parking congestion, in particular issues of safety and traffic in the lane to the north of the subject site, safety for children that are playing on the adjacent properties or in the lane, or pedestrians in the lane, or just general concerns about increased noise and traffic in general. For those affected, the general theme was some sympathy for accommodating business, but still having some apprehension around some of those parking and traffic congestions. And Mayor Creasy, there is an attachment B to the RFD that provides the draft public hearing minutes for more specific details on what we heard going through that process. During the public hearing or discussion following the public hearing, council certainly asked for some additional information on a series of topics, and I'm going to turn my attention to those starting on page 7 of the RFD, page 9, I believe, in the agenda package. The first deals with the status of the lane and the configuration. The administration's had a chance to go and observe both the lane that runs east-west across the back of the property, and also the segment that runs north-south farther off to the west of the subject site. There certainly was some observation of overgrown vegetation, which may link to some of the driver visibility issues that we heard during the public hearing. In terms of the lane itself, it's a mixture of asphalt that meets the full 5.5 meter wide standard. There's a gravel patch or portion of the lane through the middle, and then as you move to the east, it returns to asphalt, although sometimes almost only 10 feet or so wide. So 3.5 meters compared to 5.5, and in some cases failing asphalt. The staff observed through counters a number of vehicle trips. One count location was set up, and over the course of a 3-day period, approximately 230 to 280 vehicles were recorded going in and out of the lane. Evaluating that based on the available number of parking stalls in the lane for use of residents and properties along that segment, that accounts for the vast majority of those traffic trips, but it still leaves a possibility that some of the traffic trips may have been through traffic, similar to what we heard during the public hearing about people using the lane to cut through either over direct sol or vice versa. Bylaw enforcement also had the chance to do some physical observation for short periods over a 4-day period to be able to see where a vehicle started or stopped its journey. And they did note their observations were mostly that most of the vehicles were coming and going from residential properties along the lane, although 2 incidents of traffic going through and stopping at Rexall were noted in their observations. The RCMP was provided additional information about vehicle accidents in the area over typically a 5 to 6 year period from 2015 or 2013, depending on which intersection, which data that we're looking at. The lane itself did not have any recorded vehicle accidents that were reported to the police. The highest incident was closest to the subject site was over at the intersection of C&E Trail and 50th Avenue, and the second highest was actually right in front at 50th Avenue and 54, the T intersection, with 9 at C&E and 4 at the T intersection respectively, over, in both cases, approximately a 5 to 6 year period. Administration, I'm going to backtrack a little bit on page 8 of the RFD, did evaluate the option of switching the lane behind the subject property to a one-way, and I've come back with a recommendation that that's not really recommended as a solution in terms of it still has traffic possibly going to the subject site using that one-way configuration, and inconveniences the existing residents by directing them on longer routes depending on their destination, going past all the other neighbors both coming and going from home. The traffic calming also in the lane was something that administration evaluated further, and usually traffic calming is worth the effort when we're talking about speeds that are higher than 30 kilometers an hour. Lanes in Lacombe are meant to be traveled at a 20 kilometer an hour rate of travel, and the observation from the traffic counts is vast majority of traffic that was observed, 86%, was at 20 kilometers an hour or lower. Only 1% was over a 30 kilometer an hour speed limit. So staff are not recommending that traffic calming measures be employed since the cost would certainly outweigh the benefit in this particular case. Administration also evaluated the crosswalk that's on 50th Avenue in light of some of the questions about can we move it to the east side and whether or not that would free up parking space directly in front of the subject site by moving the yellow no parking zone out of the way. And the recommendation coming back is that would actually frustrate probably pedestrian movements, especially if pedestrians are coming up from 54th Street, crossing 50th to go and actually use the facility. They would now cross 2 different directions or probably take the path of least resistance, which would most likely favor the current location of the crosswalk on the west side. In addition, staff have pointed out that if it was needed to install traffic or pedestrian activated control devices, that could range from a $40,000 cost to a $150,000 cost, depending on whether or not there's overhead flashing indicators for that type of facility. Gloss over your Mayor Creasy, there were some questions about the cost to pave the lanes, if that was imposed on the applicant, and there is some information in the RFD about that as well. Typically, a linear meter of lane at 5.5 meter wide width has a cost of $425. So that's from a gravel base, or may have some gravel base going up to an asphalt standard. And if you apply that across the 24 meter wide width of the subject site, that generates a price tag of approximately $10,200 for the applicant. And if you extend further beyond that, then the price just increases accordingly. Administration also had the opportunity to evaluate the possibility of creating an on-site driveway onto 50th Avenue using the side yard on the west side of the building. And there does appear to be enough space to squeeze in a single car wide driveway. It would have to be one direction only, so pick it either inbound to the parking lot to the rear or outbound from the parking lot area to the rear. It would require some trimming of vegetation, and also raises some issues about the safety of a driveway going in through a T intersection. And finally, it also directs a fair amount of, potentially facilitates a fair amount of the drop-off traffic going and using the lane if it's only a one-way in or out type of driveway configuration. On page 10 of the RFD, Mayor Creasy, we see some planning recommendations or options for council in terms of moving ahead with the application. The first one, option 1, looks at a temporary use approach to allow monitoring over, say, a 3-year period to get a better handle on the parking congestion and traffic generation from the proposal, assuming that it stays around the 300 student capacity level. So the way that that would work is we're relying on Municipal Planning Commission, if council put this portion into the bylaw, to impose conditions to require the monitoring program. Certainly council can limit the use to that 3-year time period, which means that it would have to come back to council to extend beyond that date. The monitoring program would require oversight by administration, and the intent would be that 3 times a year there would be monitoring to get a handle on what the actual parking is, and use that to then evaluate in probably 2.5 years' time a reapplication or an application to amend the land use bylaw to consider full-time permanent status. During that same time period, under this option, MBC would be asked to set aside any big ticket items such as paving of lanes, paving of driveways, paving of parking areas, until it became more a decision was made on permanent status. So that is option one that's laid out in more detail in attachment F attached to the RFD. And the motion hopefully will be relatively straightforward if council chose to go with that option to make an amendment to bylaw 400.35 by replacing item 1 in the bylaw presented at first reading with the content shown in attachment F. The second option, Mayor Creasy, is to move to a permanent use and forgo the monitoring. So this would keep the status as discretionary. It still includes some recommendations for or tools for MPC to use in terms of attaching conditions specific to this site, specific to this use. One is noise, to deal with some of the items that we've heard at the time of the public hearing. The other is to look at possible parking configurations that encourage drop-off in the front. I will point out that when council chooses to put those kind of additional regulations or conditions in the bylaw for MPC to use, MPC still has the discretion to apply those conditions or how to apply those conditions. So under that particular option, there would be no return public hearing. The MPC would make a decision on whether or not it's approved and apply the conditions appropriately. With that, Your Worship, the administration recommendation in the RFD is to amend bylaw 400.35 using option 1, attachment F, by making the motion that you can see at the front page of the RFD. And there are the other option, of course, is to use the attachment G if council's inclined to go to permanent status and allow MPC to sort out some of those details. And finally, does remain the option for turning down third reading if council's not comfortable with the approach to parking or the impacts on the neighborhood. With that, Mayor Creasy, I'd be happy to field any questions.
Thank you very much, Planner Teal. Appreciate that. Chief Dowdy.
So I want to commend staff and Planner Teal on coming up with what I will call a yes if type approach to this development. And I think the option 1 or option 2 as presented are definitely valid approaches for council to take. As I have seen further public input and considered this development further, I actually think that both of those options create enough uncertainty in the path forward for both the applicant and the city that I would recommend council either consider option 2 or denying third reading. My rationale being, were I the small business owner who's here with us this evening, I think the idea of going down purchase and renovation investment over the next 3 years with unknown conditions potentially coming 3 years from now is very difficult to foresee as a really viable option. And alternatively, even if council passes third reading this evening, allowing a site-specific exemption, as Planner Teal has highlighted, that's not the final step. There is still a whole nother public consultation effort that goes on through the Municipal Planning Commission, where they may or may not impose the conditions that council desires. And those conditions are they're not just words on a paper. They will cost potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars for the conditions if the Municipal Planning Commission imposes conditions that they see as necessary to limit the impact of this development on the neighboring existing development to make sure it is complementary. They could be very, very significant investments. So significant, I would imagine, that they may even outweigh the costs of the planned internal renovations of the building for the applicant to make it suitable for her use there. So I think there's the potential for council to approve this evening to the vocal opposition of the neighboring community and still ultimately not see a development come to fruition there due to either the conditions that are imposed through the Municipal Planning Commission or subsequent appeal. And so, again, even if council were to say we'd like to see the following conditions as recommended in option 1 included, the Municipal Planning Commission may or may not include those, and then they may or may not be overturned if there is an appeal. it ultimately still provides potentially weeks to months of uncertainty for the neighbors, potentially months of uncertainty for the applicant. And it may come to a position of frustration nonetheless. In which case, everyone's only further into the summer, further into the fall before this decision gets made. So I know that that is not necessarily the applicant would like to hear. However, I actually, in this case, recommend not giving third reading and looking for other ways to work with the applicant to make her business successful.
Hands up there. Councillor Connick first, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So we did receive a letter from you forwarded on from the SPILO about Parkland Regional Library. Can you speak to that? Is that an option that can be done by council this evening in terms of a read? Is that something that can be done quickly? Yes, no, so what's, how would that work?
So we have previously looked at a possible land sale agreement with the applicant for that site. At that time, it wasn't supported by council. We do still have that draft that previously reviewed. I think that that could be reviewed, potentially updated and brought to council quite quickly. We don't have it ready this evening, certainly, but I think that that is a possibility that we could bring to you in July.
So while I appreciate that the question is certainly related to this project, the question before us is for the most specific area for a land use amendment. And I would think that at this time we should probably try and focus our attention to that. In saying that, I'm going to say something that may not appear popular, but it's very truthful. We are not necessarily here to find a location for an individual. I think that would be everybody's desired outcome to do so. That is not our role here. Our role is to do what's best for our community. So let's keep that in mind as we discuss things too. Councillor Jacobson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, so I've obviously thought about this a lot, like all the rest of you, and I concur with almost all of the CEO's comments, especially the part about I don't find the first option to be at all feasible, period. We might as well just kill it then. However, regardless of whether or not the MPC requirements are going to be too onerous for the applicant to continue, I think we should put that in the applicant's court, not necessarily council's. And, you know, the truth is the way it's zoned right now, if it were to be taken over by a particularly active church group who was running programming all the time and they were super motivated to do so, there may not be any noticeable difference to the residents who live there, and there would be no recourse for complaints about the period. And again, as was brought up the last meeting, the proximity of this location to the downtown core as it expands, ultimately, these are the kinds of businesses that become appropriate as you expand it out. So I would like to see us pass an amendment with the attachment G replacing item 1 and see how council deals with that. If that passes, then of course, as the mayor has mentioned, the applicant can then decide if they want to proceed going through the process of going through MPC. And if they determine that that's not feasible, so be it. But I do agree that the analysis simply, you know, is this a suitable location? So I am going to make a motion that council amend bylaw 400.35 by replacing item 1 with the content described in attachment G.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question to see legality. So NPC still may impose conditions as it would with other commercial retail businesses that have to meet the criteria through planning and development, they may require paving or off 50th Avenue access to reduce the concern of the back alley traffic. In my opinion, back alley traffic should be, in most back alleys, is the local residents and or city services. And this concern is that as it would be obviously increased traffic because of, right now, the drop-off zone is basically taking up the crosswalk and the yellow, which would obviously have to be changed to accommodate a drop-off, because it really would not be a drop-off currently as it is now, correct? So my question, the MPC can still put in stipulation conditions that would be compared to what planning and development would expect of any other rezoning. That could incur a very significant cost. Paving, landscaping to meet access and so forth. That could be $100,000 to $200,000 if you don't know that, right?
I think
Yes.
there was an indication of some expected paving costs outlined in the brief. So we're there in the neighborhood.
So the alley paving was what was highlighted, and the range there is about 10 to 20,000. But certainly the municipal planning commission is free to actually impose whatever conditions they wish on permit. However, those conditions can be appealed through the subdivision appeal board, and if found to be outside of planning guidelines, could be overturned by the SDA.
It has brought up with, commercial expansion. To me, expansion is from the inside out. Just as Rexall, when they expanded, they took up whatever amount of residential lots it took to put their business at that location. That was out, that was inside out. There are within a block, several new houses that were been built, and yeah, there's concerns of traffic, safety, pedestrian, and so forth. We have an individual that's been part of the community that's extremely passionate about the group and organization, but it's just, I feel there could be better, but it's the council's position should be yes or no. And I agree with that, but I just feel there can be better options for the direction of the passion for this business to grow. I feel it's landlocked. That's how I feel it is. And I just to set up to succeed for years to come, to be your future home. I don't see this as the best option, but that's not my decision. I'm making the decision that we're in the middle. We've got many concerned residents for legitimate reasons. And this is a lot of programs are overlapping, pick up and drop off. And the number of students and the number of options to have so many different programs over a very broad time period, rather than just a business that's 8 to 5. So I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of this location. I feel it's still within residential, and I apologize, I don't support it. I think there should be a better situation to set it to succeed many years to come. Just like you see businesses in one big downtown, and Len Thompson, they just eventually took over the whole building as other leases came up as your business group. And I just think it's, yeah. So.
Councillor Hoopstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Thank you for directing us, because I agree with you. We're not in the business here. Our role is not to find you a location. I'm sorry to say that. Our role is to see what's best for our city. But I too cannot support this motion. I would rather that we just not have third reading because of the excellent process we went through in this regard. We heard very loud and clearly from the community around this building. I was contacted personally. It's their concerns about their lane are very real. And to just add more traffic to that area, I think that I don't want to be part of even just saying, let's let it play out, because the citizens will still hear that we didn't listen to them. I think that's my opinion. But I also hear too that the owner of the business is listening to the citizens and she wants to be a good neighbor and doesn't feel like that could possibly happen. So I will not be supporting this motion in order to.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to speak to Councillor Ross's statements about, commercial business working inside out. There's commercial business right across the road from this facility right now. So it's all, they're already in the area. And as far as the facility go, I'd love to support, the business to go wherever they wish to go. That's certainly my goal. And I'd like to see that happen. The location to me has issues, but whatever goes into that facility or that place, whether it's what size of apartment could go there, 20 suites could go there? I don't know. It's down the road. It's going to be a vacant lot, basically. And so I don't know if when you talk about traffic, whether that justifies us not letting them in there, because there's going to be more traffic on that block, no matter what happens with that property. So I'd like to support it's on my favorite, obviously. I'd like to support the business in their efforts, but I'm not sure that I would be able to vote for this just because of the outcry that has come back. I think there is a better option for us in this case.
So for me, I think that this has been a positive process, and certainly there was a lot of negative input regarding this proposed amendment. I do have some compassion for those folks that have lived in that area for an awful long time. However, I think that the expectation that this is going to cause an absolute flood of traffic is overstated and unrealistic. I do not think that it's going to result in the negative effects that they are fearful of. That is not to say that their fears are not real. There's no question it's going to happen. It would have an increase in traffic. And as much as I am supportive of the idea of this amendment, is this a perfect location for this operation? No, obviously not, or we wouldn't be having this discussion. Saying that, there are very few perfect locations for a lot of things, and that's why we do make allowances and adjustments and have this process to do the best that we can with the options that we have available to us. So after giving us an awful lot of thought, like many of you have, and considering all the factors, I am supportive of the motion as it sits now. In saying that, I cannot necessarily say I am envious of going to MPC, because a couple of those of us that sit on that commission too, this is almost seems like passing the bucket. That is the process. That is the process that we have laid out before us. So I was not looking this direction. Was there any more hands up? Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I too would have to agree with you in a lot of respects. I think a lot of the concerns are being overblown a little bit in terms of traffic, in terms of, the applicant has said herself that she would work. I'm sure she would work with her parents and so forth to make sure that things would run smoothly. So I think that being said, I think there is another option. I wasn't privy to that discussion before, so I look forward to perhaps that coming back on the table. But in the hearing now, I don't think it's.
So we've had a fair bit of input. I think at this time I'm going to ask Coordinator Bellabono to read back the motion before us.
The motion on the floor is that council amend bylaw 400.35 by replacing item 1 with the content described in attachment G.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additional input on the motion before us? Councilor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. If we vote for this deal, Gowdy, will that restrict us on the other option if possible?
Third reading will be, has been proposed as Councilor Jacobson has proposed with the appendix G replacing item 1. And so that will be the third and final reading of the bylaw. There will not be an opportunity for a third reading substituting option F, for example.
No, I'm talking about the other option for the business owner.
Totally separate.
Totally separate, so that still it could be on the table. Okay, that's all I wanted.
No fair question. Yeah, what's the confusion there? Because there were so many options involved in this. And I think that's fair comments.
Is that all? I mean, to me, that changes things a lot. Okay.
Anyone else? Any additional items of clarification, concerns? Very good. Then on the motion before us, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? And those opposed? So the record will reflect that councillors Conacross and Hoekstra were opposed, which represents 50% of those in attendance here. Because it is an equal vote, we have one absent seat. As you can see, Councillor Hibbs was unable to join us this evening. And as a tie vote, according to our bylaws, that is defeated. And item 5.2, Heritage Resources Committee update. Manager Hackett, you're online.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Creasy.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, Mayor Creasy, members of council. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to present bylaw amendment 397.2, an amendment to the Heritage Resources Committee bylaw. The purpose of my presentation tonight is just to briefly outline the proposed amendment and to present for your consideration possible next steps for the Heritage Resources Committee. City Council passed a motion at the February 22nd meeting. That feels like a long time ago, but back when it was cold, it passed a motion directing administration to consult with the Heritage Resources Committee, or HRC, regarding its scope of work and to remove the appointment of a council member to the committee. Since that time, administration have consulted with HRC and have also reviewed related heritage documents. So just as some background, the HRC is a council-appointed committee, and it falls under bylaw 397. Their mandate is to advise the City of Lacombe staff and council on any matter related to heritage significance of building structures or landscape features, and they are responsible for managing of the Heritage Resource Fund. The committee has successfully advanced this mandate in Lacombe, and the city has a very well-regarded heritage preservation program and fund. The amendment before you this evening, 397.2, proposes to adjust the committee membership. However, as we were reviewing the membership, another heritage-related matter came to light, and this relates to buildings over the age of 50 years that are proposing demolition. Under bylaw 397, applications for demolition of buildings or structures that are aged 50 years or older or having possible heritage significance are reviewed by the HRC for a recommendation, which goes on to the decision maker, which is the development authority, so usually MPC, back to MPC. Now, administration has studied this process and some future changes are recommended, which I'd like to take a moment to go over with you. So 50-year-old buildings, how many are there in Lacombe? Well, based on assessment records in Lacombe, there are hundreds and hundreds of primary buildings in Lacombe older than 50. In fact, our assessment records show that over 700 residential buildings alone were built in 1971 or earlier. Under the current approach, any and all of these would be subject to the requirement for an HRC review and recommendation should they decide to demolish and apply for a demolition permit. Now, this is on top of the planning review process and on top of the development authority decision-making process. So there's quite a bit facing them if they come forward with a demolition permit. As we look at the last 5 years and we do a little bit of analysis, in attachment A to the report, you can see that between 2017 and 2021, there were 16 buildings in Lacombe older than 50 years that applied for demolition. But none of them were listed as having particular heritage interest or value or significance in any of our heritage documents. Yet all were subject to a review by the Heritage Resources Committee, a full review. And in the end of the day, all did receive permission from MPC for demolition. So it can be argued that the Heritage Resources Committee review brings an extra layer of consideration to the table before demolition decisions are made. But I think it can also be argued that the process may be duplicating some of the other heritage tools in place in our city. And in particular, it seems to be duplicating the Municipal Heritage Survey and Places of Interest list, which is found in the survey. And I'll just explain those a little bit further. The Municipal Heritage Survey is a list of all the older or historic buildings or sites in Lacombe. And by older, I mean 50 and older. It catalogs and documents Lacombe's heritage resources, particularly residences, schools, churches, and memorials. It was completed in 2010 with a heritage consulting expert, the local steering committee, and community input. One of the most important outcomes from that survey was a places of interest list, or POIL. And a POIL is a refined subset of the survey, which identifies the sites having the most potential heritage value. It was created through community feedback and research. And in Lacombe, out of the whole big survey, 109 properties were listed in the POIL. And these were the sites that were agreed on as having the most potential heritage value. So administration is recommending that Lacombe start to streamline the current demolition permitting process from requiring a recommendation from HRC on all buildings over 50 to only those buildings with the most potential historic significance, meaning sites found on this POIL or this places of interest list. But to effectively implement this recommendation, administration does feel an update to the Heritage Survey and the POIL is essential. Because those were done in 2010, it's over 10 years since those have been updated. Certainly more buildings have turned 50 in that time. But even more important, because new information may have come to light about some of the buildings or sites in Lacombe that we didn't know 10 years ago. And also, like anything, our understanding of a community's heritage, of heritage resources, and how these are defined evolves over time. And particularly in the last few years, we can see that evolution of communities recording their history and just reflecting on what's important to recognize in their history. And so updating the survey and the POIL does give Lacombe an opportunity to consider sites or categories of sites that were not on the list previously for whatever reason. So council certainly could make the change to bylaw 397 tonight to adjust the HRC role to recommendations on demolitions only for sites on the POIL, but it is recommended that an updated survey and POIL be put in place first before that change is made. And this work could be given budget consideration in the 2022 budget. So that work, if it's something council is interested in, is recommended as a future amendment. Tonight, the bylaw in front of you is for consideration to remove the council representative from membership with the HRC as originally requested of administration. And in discussing this with HRC, there was a question as to whether the member would be replaced, perhaps with a public member or a member from a coactive community organization. that would retain committee size rather than making the committee smaller. It would bring a representative in from a related organization who maybe could offer a diversity of opinion around the table, and maybe create some links in the community, for example, to the tourism or the business community. So in future, council may wish to consider replacing the position with a representative from a like-minded community group. And this amendment certainly could come forward at a future date following discussion with related groups about their potential interest, if council so directed. In terms of the committee role and scope, the HRC is taking the leading role in heritage grants on behalf of the city and several other key functions in supporting heritage preservation, and no recommendations are made for changes to the committee role or scope at this time. In terms of a specific work plan for the HRC, we did consult with committee members about their interests in their future work plan. They identified promoting heritage designations as on their work plan right now and moving forward. Interest in updating the municipal survey and places of interest list, as we just talked about. Updating, clarifying the land use bylaw around some of the heritage regulations, particularly if there's changes to the places of interest list, and creating an annual heritage award program. And while all of these are important, administration is proposing the most critical for Lacombe's heritage program is updating the survey and places of interest list. So in summary, there's a lot of potential in the city working together with the HRC to update the processes and documents to protect heritage, and yet at the same time to streamline some of the processes related to non-recognized 50-year-old buildings that may be seeking redevelopment. And the next steps, if there's council direction, would be to remove the council member as in the bylaw amendment tonight. Council may also wish to ask administration to reach out to other community organizations about filling a seat on HRC in the future. Council may wish to ask administration to work with HRC to bring forward a budget request to council for updating the survey and POIL, and may ask administration to work with the committee on updates to the land use bylaw related to this. So the recommendation before council tonight is to give first reading to bylaw amendment 397.2 to remove a council member from the Heritage Resources Committee. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Manager Hackett. Councillor Gullikson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Are we allowed to ask questions regarding the process?
Process-related questions are fine, yeah.
They're defined because of it is first reading, so okay. I just have a question regarding the inspection of these heritage homes, supposedly. If it's on the POIL, it will automatically be inspected. If it's not on the POIL, it will not be inspected. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Creasy, sorry. That is the proposal. Right now, any building over the age of, principal building over the age of 50 is subject to that inspection, the photographs, the reviewing of items in the building for salvage. Under proposed moving forward, if we have the update, it would be just those buildings that have been identified as being on the places of interest list, of having some potential value and potential significance.
Okay, one of the things that I found through MPC is that some of these buildings, even though they're not on a POIL, they have some historical items or things of interest inside. When they do their inspection, that's a bit of a surprise. And this, to me, potentially you could miss that if we don't look at these buildings and just adjust that age of building back down and say we want to look at a 60-year-old building, for example, to ensure that there isn't anything inside that we weren't aware of.
Certainly, I see the CAO has his hand up too, so I don't know if I should go first or not.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. That is one of, I think, the strongest things that the HRC does, which is identify through their inspection, first of all, document in photographs and in writing the history of the building before before it is demolished. So that's really valuable to the archives in Lacombe. I think the other piece that you mentioned is just identifying that list of what could be salvaged. Is there old cabinets? Are there old door hardware? And asking the owner if they would, rather than sending those to the landfill, if they would offer those to be salvaged, and maybe other building owners who are restoring rather than demolishing would like to have access to those materials. And that's kind of the system right now. Those could certainly continue, maybe not in a regulatory way, but more in a collaborative way. And in asking the building owner, hey, you've had approval to demolish your 60-year-old or 70-year-old house. The HRC would like to photograph it just for records and would like to just see if there's any items you're willing to let them salvage that then they could keep in the heritage community, because sometimes it is hard to get those materials that are 80 years old. You have nowhere to find, or 50 or 60 years old. And so this is a great system of having those items for owners that do want to restore. And so I think the committee would be willing to continue that work, but in a more collaborative rather than regulatory approach that could be appealed or that the owner can be concerned about as a development condition, but rather as just as a cooperative, collaborative program.
Chief Cody?
Very similar to what Manager Hackett was saying, but just to add that is that's one of the reasons we are recommending an update of the places of interest list, is also to try and make sure that such instances would be rare, where there would be items that hadn't been documented.
Can I speak? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that through MPC, we've noticed that there are times where you get surprised in buildings that you think there's nothing in there. And then there's items that are interesting to the Historical Society. So I mean, I like the idea of less work, appreciate that. But to do this survey, I'm afraid that there's potential for us to miss some buildings that have some historical value that would come up if we had a date set on. The 50 years is ridiculous, obviously, but I mean, it should be 60 or 70 years. And then we would have a much better opportunity to find something historical that has value to that committee and to the community.
So I too see the 50-year-old threshold to be very unrealistic. There's nothing that makes a property of historical significance because of a 50-year age limit. It may be, but if that's the only criteria, this is ridiculous. That's in fact why we see properties come across the docket at MPC, which quite frankly ought not to have ever been there. And I think that it diminishes the important work that the HRC does in identifying those valuable properties where special care does need to be taken to protect those valuable items in our community or properties in our community. So I would be very much in favor of seeing the 50-year threshold disappear. Before us now today was hoped to be in the first reading for the council member, and I look forward to seeing how that goes as well. We have some very qualified members in there, and I'm thankful that we've got individuals with an interest in that kind of thing. And generally speaking, probably, perhaps not always, but probably have a fair bit more breadth of knowledge on the subject than generally people in council do, and perhaps even some administration, quite honestly. So I'm thankful for the work that they do. I just hate to see the importance of their work be diminished by including generally residential properties, but not always, that are there because of the 50-year threshold, which that in and of itself, in my opinion, is not the criteria that is important on standing on its own. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just I applaud the review. I think it's great to hopefully eliminate some of the red tape and so forth. But I guess my concern is, as developers or the landowner has their wishes to make further use of that land, does the process still continue within planning development so that the developer's process is not interfered with or time delayed because of this? I guess.
It With respect to what?
The application of the developer safety as intentions after the demolition, obviously, or else we wouldn't be doing demolition. But I guess my concern as, you know, the process through planning development, is their process still continuing, or is that solely waiting for the Heritage Resources Committee to make their decisions, which is a time interruption to the developer? Do they overlap, and still does the process of the development application still move on forward?
It does move on, but I think that Manager Hackett will tell us that in fact, because of the process nature itself, it does involve more time, which in instances where the property really ought not be there, it does create an undue burden on development.
I just find it disruptive to a developer's timeline if it is delayed for significant time frame that really, just like you're saying, is 50 years, some of the 50-year houses is really irrelevant, even though we all don't know some of the history of that particular house. Might be a prominent individual that might be, but all the respect, museums take a huge amount of money for maintenance. But anyways, I just want to keep that we're reviewing it for the purpose that hopefully we're still, the developers, investors can still move forward the timeline without a delay. That's what has been brought to me in the past. And individuals, I just want fairness on both sides.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm a little bit confused by what Councillor Gullickson said. So wouldn't the municipal heritage survey and places of interest list do what you're asking? Like you're saying some places would be missed, but wouldn't they be caught in that list initially? Like what part am I missing there?
Fair question, Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll speak to that. What happens is that there's some buildings that come to us that don't look like they're of any interest at all, and would probably not be on the list. And there's items inside that are of interest that they're not aware of.
Why wouldn't they have been on the list though? Wouldn't that survey?
There's a substantial difference between being of historical significance as opposed to a property containing substantial or historical related items, architectural significant items. And that's specifically why Manager Hackett mentioned there would still be a collaborative process for individuals who own properties that are aged, whereby we're hoping that they would still allow access to the HRC to go through the property and say yay or nay. But by removing them off of this list, it would expedite the process and not further delay development. It just becomes less formal and more collaborative. Is that a fair assessment, Manager Hackett?
Absolutely, Mayor Creasy. That's the goal.
Councillor Hoekstra?
I'll move that council get first reading to bylaw 3972.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Very good. I will call the question then. All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is carried. Chief Duddy?
Mayor Creasy, with my apologies, I would like to request that we return briefly to the matter of bylaw 400.35. It's been brought to my attention that the motion that was voted on and defeated through the timed process was actually a motion to amend the third reading prior to third reading being given. And so as it stands right now, that third reading itself actually could be in limbo and would not expire until 2 years pass. So for the sake of certainty for the applicant, I would request that, I guess, council consider and reconsider or consider.
And that is a fair observation. I think there may be an expectation of how that will go, but because of the way that it is worded, I think that that is entirely appropriate in this case. Do we have someone willing to make a motion so that we can deal with that item? Councillor Jacobson.
I move council get third reading to bylaw 400.35.
Thank you. Do we have any additional input, questions, concerns? Very good. With respect to that motion as just entered into minutes by Councillor Jacobson, with show of hands, all those in favor and those opposed, and pretty much as expected and so noted. Thank you, everyone. I think that does certainly remove the element of uncertainty for the property owner as well as neighboring property owners. So thank you for bringing that forward. So there was talk of other possibilities for Heritage Resources Committee. Is there any desire to put forward any at this time? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. May I ask one more question?
Of course you can.
So, as I believe Councillor Jacobson, you're on Heritage Resources Committee, correct? So when these 50-year-old buildings come to you and you just determine they are a 50-year-old building and they wanted to be demolished, does a process like that demoralize that committee? Like, I guess I see the value of having this places of interest list updated. Like, has that been not waste of your time, but that you just determine a house should be demolished? I don't know. Help me out here whether this is important or not.
Councillor Jacobson.
If I understand correctly, you would like to know if when the process of requesting the recommendation on the demolition, if it's just ignored, if that demoralizes the committee, that's.
Yes, continue. No, I guess I meant that if that's the job you're asked to do, sure. I'm not saying that your decision would be ignored, but that you're just asked, can we demolish this building? And then you determine yes, because it's just sort of a nothing building. Does that feel like that's a waste of your time? Like, because that kind of building would not be on this places of interest list, is my understanding. So then it would take those sort of mundane tasks off your list or off your.
So what I can tell you that is, in practice, and this is actually part of the Heritage Resources operating procedure, it is actually the director of the Historical Society, who is the staff person with the expertise to actually go take a look at it, right? So I would imagine, frankly, that question should be directed to that staff member, honestly. In practice, there's always a request if anybody wants to accompany that person to go do it. I've seen that acted on sometimes, often not. And usually it's a matter of a minute of discussion for 90% of the cases. And when there is one of significance, then it creates, there's a lot of discussion then. But I would think probably, that question should be asked in that position, whether or not they think, that some added criteria should be put into this, perhaps not waste their time. That would be my answer.
So I'm not seeing any hands. We can move on from that. We're not interested in any other motions with respect to HRC at this time. Very good. One question of administration. Manager Hackett or Chief Gotti, do we have an approximate time frame when council can expect those items that were discussed in this brief, specifically the 50-year building window consideration and that was a fleeting thought. The other item,
The change of the councillor or councilman.
right? When those can be expected to come across the agenda again?
Mayor Creasy, members of council, I believe the committee would be interested in presenting the budget during the budget discussions, presenting a proposal for an updated survey in POIL. So coming quickly to budget. And then in February, the government of Alberta has a deadline for matching funding. So if that were approved by council, there would be a February timeline for 50% matching funding from the government of Alberta. So that is kind of would be the first few steps. And then hopefully by middle of 2022, having that updated POIL or end.
And also, if I could ask, with respect to an updated POIL, while I appreciate that we would like to be working with current and accurate information, I'm just wondering if the time and effort involved, my expectation is going to be insignificantly changed from the current list, given that the consideration of removing the 50-year window would theoretically be removed. So what we're basically hoping to sift out of the chat is the idea that there are some buildings that could have fallen into that category that will be missed solely because of that age class that may have been missed as being seen as historically significant in the past and were not put on that list. So I think I want to temper our expectations to suggest that there's going to be a significant change to that list was done before. I think is a realistic expectation. Chief Dowdy?
There could also be a select few that were, say, 45 years old when the POIL was first passed, and maybe weren't given as thorough review as they would be now during the update, but it would be a hand.
I agree. Very good. So with that item behind us, we can move on to item 5.3, the Lure contributed asset transfer. Manager Lapointe, are you online? Very good. The floor is yours.
Well, good evening, Mayor Creasy and Council. This evening, Council is asked to consider the proposed contributed asset transfer from the Lacombe Fish and Game Association. The transfer applies to the world's largest fishing lure, which launched in 2019 to commemorate the 90th anniversary of the Thompson-Pallister Bait Co. As you may remember, the lure was a multifaceted partnership with the city providing access to the required land, Echo Lacombe and Thompson-Pallister Bait co-sponsoring the initiative, and Comet Welding spearheading the fabrication of the lure. At the moment, Lacombe Fish and Game owns the lure and is looking to complete the transfer so that the lure receives regular and ongoing maintenance. This transfer will preserve the attraction for future generations. So the Lacombe Fish and Game resolved to transfer the lure to the city at its June 8th, 2021 meeting. And should the city accept the lure, net community benefits result. And those are the aforementioned proactive equipment maintenance and replacement. And also, if it were part of the city's art collection, insurance will cover any damages to the structure, which means a quick resolution to issues that arise. So administration is recommending that council approve the world's largest fishing lure contributed asset transfer as presented. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Manager Lapointe. Councillor Connick?
I was hoping that council approves the world's largest fishing lure contributed asset transfer.
Thank you. Anyone else? So Manager Lapointe, I guess I would just like to point out, I appreciate the fact that ongoing maintenance and whatnot at some point in time will be an issue. From my perspective, although I'm a member of the Lacombe Fish and Game Association, I really had very little to do other than some facilitation in this particular project, to be quite frank. I see this more as an appropriate transfer of title for the insurance requirements as I do them trying to get out of doing some maintenance or whatnot, because I think that that particular group has been extremely helpful, not only with this very well-known landmark for us, but for the entire Len Thompson fishing pond area. So I just don't want that to be construed as being a negative thing.
Point well taken. And to your point, I mean, they've added lights and have done an excellent job of maintaining the site to date for sure. So again, if it's within our purview, we'll ensure that that ongoing maintenance is maintained ourselves as well.
Anyone else with respect to the motion before us then? All those in favor? I see no one opposed, so that is unanimous as well. Thank you. And next up, I'll call in Director Duke. For item 5.4, the Legion Memorial Flag Project. The floor is yours, Director Duke.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before Council tonight is a request for decision on the proposal from the Lacombe Royal Canadian Legion branch number 79, and Veterans Voices of Canada to become a host community partner of a memorial flag display. Council received a joint presentation from the two groups on June 7th, 2021 at the Committee of the Whole meeting, and tonight's request for decision contains a link to the live stream of that presentation, which is available online, of course. The display will be a row of 128 flags honoring the 128,000 fallen Canadian service personnel to date. The display takes place annually, or will anyway, in September, from September to October for approximately 6 to 8 weeks. And the proposal is to use the Missioner Park Highway 12 frontage as identified in the aerial map layout attached to the RFD. Administration anticipates no impacts to the parks, recreation, or roads service levels from this annual installation, but the city's cultural service level will be boosted. And because the Legion's aims will be accomplished for memorializing veterans, as well as they're getting some fundraising from the event, the city support of nonprofit and volunteer community groups will be elevated somewhat. The RFD also contains a link to a similar display that currently takes place in Sylvan Lake each fall. And if Council's decision tonight is to support this initiative with an in-kind contribution of the land, the use of the land, administration recommends entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Legion for everyone's certainty. With an MOU, if at any time the city needs to otherwise use this land, advance notice to the Legion to relocate the display should be provided. Following the MOU, if that is Council's decision tonight, anchors for the flag poles will be installed and remain year-round, with the poles going in approximately mid-September each year. Administration is secondarily recommending sponsorship of one flag per year by the city, which will be at a cost of $250, which is incorrectly identified in the RFD as $150. So with this, I'll take any questions that Council may have on this initiative.
Thank you, Director Duke. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yes, Director Jude. Quick question on the maintenance. Do the flags affect our maintenance on the property at all? Because they're going to stay there for the actual bases, will be there permanently. Is that correct?
I understand so, and our Parks Manager, Calvin Benefield, has not expressed any concerns with those interfering with, for example, mowing.
And so are they going to be below ground?
I understand flush to ground is what my understanding is.
So no tripping hazards or anything like that?
Exactly.
Or flat tires from that farmer's market? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This is an awesome project. I think it'll bring in a lot of tourism and anyways, it's a very positive thing. So I'll make the motion that council approves. The city's partnering with Lacombe Royal Canadian Legion branch number 79 and Veteran Voices of Canada for a Flags of Remembrance project in Lacombe in the proposed location along Highway 12 adjacent to Missioner Park.
Thank you. Any additional input? We'll call the question and all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Hoekstra.
I'll move that council approve sponsorship of the flag and the display in 2021 and 2022.
Thank you. Any additional input on this item? I think that flag in honor of those who have fought for our country is entirely appropriate on behalf of the city. That leaves 125 other opportunities for individuals and organizations to participate too. So certainly in favor of that. Anyone? Call a question then. All those in favor? And that is unanimous as well. Thank you, Director Duke.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council.
So prior to asking you to address the Council Committee Review Report, which I inadvertently just crossed off my list, item 5.5. Director Duke, I understand this is your final council meeting with us. And
That's correct.
I just wanted to express certainly myself, and I expect on behalf of council, how much that we have enjoyed your participation here at the city of Lacombe. I would suggest that rarely is it a case when someone can move to a community and instantly become such a part of it and be successful with a lot of varied groups and organizations and committees and that kind of thing. And you've been an absolute delight to work with. I understand that there are some family considerations and whatnot that have led you to consider a position with Yellowhead County.
That's correct.
Very good. In as much as it's Lacombe's loss, I wish you all the best and wish you nothing but good fortune in the future. We appreciate everything that you've done for us here at the city of Lacombe.
Thank you so much, Mayor Creasy. It's very nice to hear. Wonderful.
With that in mind, we're still going to put you to work.
Yeah.
So item 5.5, the Council Committee Review Report number 6, please.
Certainly. Thank you very much. This review continues the Comprehensive Council Committee Review Project to fulfill Council's 2017-2021 strategic plan goal, supporting open and accessible government. And the Council Committee's Review Report number 6 examines the ad hoc Affordable Housing Steering Committee, the Council Remuneration Committee established by Council through policy, and the proposed DARP, or Downtown Area Revitalization Plan Advisory Committee, currently an administrative task force. Sorry, that's a redevelopment plan, not a revitalization plan. I made that mistake a few times, so sorry. All three committees help the city to deliver services primarily by inputting public, stakeholder, and technical perspectives into council decision-making in the service areas. Council can refer to the revised Council Committee's Review Report number 6, which is attached to this RFD for a detailed analysis of each committee. And again, this is amended. This report has now been amended slightly as a result of the discussion that occurred on June 7th in the Council Committee of the Whole meeting. So just to kick it off, the Affordable Housing Committee is, as I said, ad hoc. It was formed in 2015 to put the city's affordable housing strategy into effect. Currently, there are 2 councillor appointments. An annual meeting time required is about 8 hours total. There are no operating costs for this committee. The managerial liaison and administrative support is supplied by the Manager of Community Economic Development. And this committee achieves IAP2 public engagement at the collaborate level with some elements of empowerment with the recommendations that come to council being warmly received, if nothing else. Administration consulted with the committee members on June 8th on their potential future, and they unanimously expressed a desire to continue working on affordable housing, even in the absence of dispersible funding. So that that desire and some other elements of the work they might do has been worked into the amended terms of reference, which are attached to this RFD, as is their recommendation to reduce the council representation to 1 member instead of 2. So the administration's recommended options to amend the committee therefore are to formally establish the Affordable Housing Steering Committee by resolution tonight with the draft terms of reference as attached. And note that that includes reducing the council representation to 1 person and appointing all existing Affordable Housing Steering Committees along with their current terms, other than the 1 council member immediately to the new committee that's formed. So I'll pause there unless you'd like me to move on to the next committee.
Thank you. Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Yeah, I want to make the motion. The council formally established the Affordable Housing Committee as a council committee with terms of reference as presented and appoints all current members within existing terms. We met not too long ago, this committee, and they do express a desire to continue the work. Affordable housing issues in this community simply don't go away because there's no money to put towards it. They want to be on top of it. They mentioned too during our meeting that they will actively look to see if they can get funding, just because there isn't any available. They can try to access funding through grants and so forth. I suspect with the federal election looming that there will be promises of more monies. And this is a good community. There's a good group on there, and they're engaged and want to stay on top of it. So I think it should go from ad hoc to a standing committee, and rather than disbanded, they can continue to meet throughout the year and try and tackle these issues of housing as they arise.
Thank you. Appreciate that input. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So the motion says and appoints all current members with their existing terms. Does that mean both councillors will be? So I found the motion was not representing what was desired here, but
In terms of reference, mention one council.
it still says all current.
Exactly, and
Okay, yeah.
so just for clarity, we did plan on reducing the council input to a single individual, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Ross, I believe you sit on that committee as well. How do you see?
I concur with Councillor Koenig. I think the board has a cross-section of several different groups that have a invested interest in affordable housing, and I think it serves its purpose very well. And even if there isn't some money immediately available, I think even meeting quarterly, there's always some projects come forward that can still continue with relationships with the groups that are pertaining to it, or maybe in relationship with those demographics. So I concur.
Very good. Anyone else? So to be clear then, appoint this as a more formal committee. It had been ad hoc in previous, and current members with only single representation from council. Okay. So with respect to that motion then, can I have a show of hands, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Director Duke, Councillor Remuneration Committee, everyone's favorite.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Established by policy, and the policy is updated at least once per council term. Total membership is 3 elected officials. Minimum 1 meeting per year, not predetermined in length, and that's rather a workshop style type meeting. Again, no operating cost for this committee. And the managerial liaison is officially the Chief Administrative Officer. Administrative supports are the Senior Manager of Financial Services and the Manager of Human Resources. This committee achieves IAP 2 public engagement at the informed level. So recommended options to amend the committee are simply to direct administration to amend the policy to clarify council remuneration and per diem eligibility in the next policy update. And that's to simply ensure that the informed level of engagement is fully achieved.
Thank you. I doubt there's many that would argue with the fact that increased communication is always a good thing. We still have many members in our community that feel that or think that council receives a lot of benefits and healthcare and pension and those types of things. And I think that we need to be very clear that that in fact is not the case. So increased communication is always a good thing. However, we can disseminate that information to the public is certainly welcome. Anybody interested in a motion on this item? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion that council accept the review of council remuneration committee as information with direction to administration to itemize remuneration and clarify entitlements to in the related policy.
Thank you. Any additional input? All those in favor? And that was unanimous as well. On to DART, please, Director Duke.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. This task force was formed by administration in 2021 to provide stakeholder input for the conception and prioritization of capital projects that will implement the downtown area redevelopment plan. Draft terms of reference to formalize the committee are attached. These are updated from prior presentations to council. Annual meeting time required for the committee is to be determined, but there are no operating costs for this committee. Managerial liaison and administrative support, again, will be the manager of community economic development. And this committee has quite successfully achieved IAP2 public engagement at the collaborate level, again, with elements of empowerment, although it's very new. So that certainly could be different in future, but the collaborate level is what it's shooting for. Administration's recommended options to amend the city's current relationship with this committee are to formally establish the DARP Advisory Committee by resolution tonight with the draft terms of reference as attached to this RFD. Appoint the existing members of the task force to the new committee and appoint one member of council to the committee for the remainder of this council's term in office.
Thanks, Director Duke. A lot of deep thought going on here, but nobody making a motion. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks for Creasy. That council formally, I'll move that council formally establish the DARP Advisory Committee as a council committee with terms of reference as presented and appoints all current members plus one council.
And just so we can be forthright with that, how many individuals does that make for that committee?
Oh, that's a very good question, Mayor Creasy. I'll just have a quick look at the report and let you know. It's quite a number. But no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to come up with that number for you tonight. I can get back to council with that number though.
Okay. I don't think it's necessarily going to change the way anybody votes. I just think it's important for the public to understand how many are involved in that particular committee, because I think it is substantial.
Actually, I can-
Oh, I just have to point out quickly on the way this motion is recorded, that it's, I'm not sure if Councilor Hicks did this on purpose, but her motion read plus one councillor, not plus one councillor for remaining council term. And I think that's actually important. That would imply then that councilor's term would end in 3 months here, right? So I think the way she has spoken is correct. I want to make sure it's written that way and not copied verbatim from the recommended vote.
Very good. First off, I would like clarification from Councillor Hoekstra. Which way you want that to be?
I just read the recommended motion as it was in the memo. I did not have any particular intent. At the beginning of the RFD, that motion. Right.
So with respect to the council appointment on the committee, that is for the remainder of the term, was that your intent, I'm assuming?
It is my intent, but I.
And in future, then there would be a councillor, whoever that may be, appointed to that committee on an ongoing basis.
Mayor Creasy, I'll just jump in to say that that's the intent of this. And I'll just point out that the terms of reference do allow for the ongoing council representation in future, but tonight's appointment, we'll have to find a council member by name that wishes to sit on this committee for the remainder of this council term. And while I'm talking, I might as well let you know that it is currently 10 members. The council member will make it an 11th member.
Thank you very much. I knew it was a high number. I wasn't sure what the exact amount was, but certainly an odd number is preferable given that everyone on that committee does have a voting seat. Any additional input? Councillor Goldson?
So which one was read? You read the one at the top, right? Where it says council, not for council for this term. So
We have not appointed a councillor to this committee at this point in time. Anyway, so the only way that would be different is if the individual who was appointed either did not want to continue on or chose not to be a councillor after the end of the term. So I think we're kind of splitting hairs, but if you
no,
like further clarification, I think.
I'm just wondering, like the councillor, I mean, where you put on there, it'd be nice to continue on through that next term.
And in my opinion, that would certainly be a strong possibility, but never said it. Yeah, that remains to be seen. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Rick Creasy. We can't certainly appoint a councillor to carry on in the next term, because then we're sort of speaking to the will of the people in terms of maybe we won't get voted in. So I think it's.
Well, then they're not a councillor.
It's kind of it's just we'll have appointed a councillor to it. And then the election happens and then all the appointments happen again. So I don't know. I'm comfortable with my motion as I read it.
Very good. Anything else? I will call the question then. All those in favor? I see none opposed. That is carried.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll just take a moment of council's time to in turn thank you all so much for the opportunity to work with you on this beautiful community, the community's affairs. And I've appreciated so much working with CAO Gowdy and the CLT team and all of the staff at the city of Langford or Lacombe, sorry. And if I just might take a moment to say again, I've enjoyed my time here very much and I'm leaving with real regret.
Thank you very much. Like I said, we certainly wish you all the best and thank you for the service to our community.
Thank you. Bye now.
So we will move on. Director Piche, I believe that you are with us as well. Call on you to through item 5.6, bylaw 469.1 for the responsible animal ownership amendment. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council tonight is third reading of the Responsible Animal Ownership Bylaw Amendment 469.1. The key changes of the bylaw amendment are adding the urban apiaries within the city of Lacombe, prohibiting animals on sports fields, and altering the ability for the bylaw enforcement officers to declare an animal as dangerous rather than going through the court system. At the May 25th council meeting, council passed first and second reading. However, there were some suggestions to create a more concise schedule for the general penalties. From these recommendations that were made, those changes were incorporated, and I hope that they are to council's satisfaction. Administration also introduced the section about prohibiting animals on sports fields to the Lacombe and District Recreation Parks Culture Board on June 15th. And as a result, they passed a motion that was in favor. The motion read that the Lacombe and District Recreation Parks and Culture Board supports adding section 5.20. The owner of an animal shall ensure that such animal shall not enter a sports field area. And that was, of course, to the Responsible Animal Ownership Bylaw Amendments 4.69.1. At this time, administration is asking that council provides third reading for this bylaw amendment. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them at this time.
Appreciate that, Director Piche. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Very much look forward to this. I look forward to the enforcement. I think there's been a lot of areas of the city that have had community gatherings to clean up our areas as a result of neglect. And I hope this is enforced, please. Anyways, I make the motion that council give third reading to bylaw 469.1, responsible animal ownership bylaw amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, Director Pesce, I just want clarification on the sports field, for prohibiting animals on sports fields. Now, when you're talking about that, in this case, just for clarification for the public, that doesn't include the sidelines, is that not correct?
That's correct. It does not include the sidelines or the trails or anywhere around it. It's just specifically right on the sports fields.
So they'd still be able to come and watch their granddaughter or daughter
Yeah.
or son play
Absolutely.
soccer and still have their dog on the sidelines, just not on the field themselves.
Not on the field. That's all we ask.
Great. Thank you very much for clarification.
Director Pesce, I did have an individual ask me with respect to urban apiaries, are
Okay.
property owners required to post their property when they choose to keep beehives or choose to have beehives on it?
When you say post them, like put a sign up?
Yes.
No, not at all.
I think it was an individual that had a child that was rather allergic and just wanted to know what the regulations were. I don't know if there was necessarily any.
Yeah, we
intent
do
that there
have
had
to.
be, but their curiosity more than anything.
I appreciate the question. We do have to go through a process similar to the urban hens, where when an application for the apiaries or an urban hen is received by the city, we send out letters to the adjacent landowners of where that property is, and there has to be at least 50% approval from their neighboring properties to be able to approve to have urban hens or apiaries.
And I think that's a wonderful idea. I don't know that immediate neighbors are the ones that would necessarily be at risk. I think it was more of a concern where it was individuals that perhaps bordered a natural area or a community path where there would be individuals coming by and not knowing that there was a likelihood that there could be an encounter with the bee because of their close proximity to it. So I'm hesitant in making that a requirement, but I think it would be a good suggestion for those instances that could possibly occur that they do in fact choose to post their property on bordering areas of pathways or recreation areas. And quite frankly, it could be a positive thing just to show that they are in fact doing something for the environment. I don't think that would be too much to ask, and probably most people that choose to have them would be happy to do so. So I will leave that in your capable hands.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else? That you do. Councillor Ross, you had made the motion, correct? Does anyone need the motion read back to them? We all good or no? Not seeing a lot of indication one way or another. So Coordinator Bellabono, perhaps we could just have the motion read back to us, please.
That council give third reading of bylaw 469.1 responsible animal ownership bylaw amendment.
Thank you. Everyone's had their appropriate input. We're all good. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Thank you. Director Pesce, the request for proposal for supply of electricity for the term of 2024 through 2026. Item 5.7, please.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Creasy. Before council this evening is a request for approval to secure electricity pricing for the City of Lacombe facilities starting January 1st, 2024. The city proactively manages its energy supply requirements through wholesale forward electricity and natural gas markets. Using this approach, we secure pricing for our electricity and natural gas for up to 5 years in advance. This allows the city to prepare budgets and to be able to anticipate any increases or savings. With the assistance from our wholesale market consultants Energy Associates International, the city issued an RFP to request that vendors provide indicative pricing for a 3-year period from January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2026. There were 4 companies that responded to the RFP and met the pre-qualification criteria. They were Direct Energy, ENMAX Energy, Capital Power, and Campus Energy. Page 6 of the attachment in the in-camera section displays each of the company's quotes. The way this process works is that the city will issue a RFP and then it will receive the pre-qualification bids to ensure that the vendors have the ability to meet the city's needs and electricity supply. Then a request goes to council for the approval of the selected vendor list and to authorize the CAO to enter into an agreement once a live bid is enacted upon. The vendors are provided with a date and time to acquire their live market bid price. And once that occurs, the consultant will have approximately 15 to 30 minutes to notify the city of the prices and make their recommendation of which vendor to select. They take into account not only the per megawatt amount, but they also include the administration costs and any volume thresholds. This agreement must be signed within a very short time frame, usually less than an hour. And that being said, we need to ensure that those who are going to be doing the signing are available at that time. Normally, this is always done in the past that I've experienced on a Thursday after the council meeting that this has been approved. However, this Thursday being July 1st, we're going to probably do the live bid on July 8th. As council can see, all of the bids are higher than what we are paying for our current contract. We're at $47.31 per megawatt. The prices that we're seeing in the indicative pricing is closer to the price we saw in 2018 to 2020. One of the reasons that we do not do spot pricing, as you can see if you look on page 2 of that package, is that the spot pricing we would be trading at about $108 per megawatt hour. At this time, administration asks that council approves the preferred vendor list and that council authorizes the CAO to execute a 3-year electrical supply agreement with the start date of January 1st, 2024. Please note that there is an error in the recommended motion. It should be January 1st, 2024 and not 2023. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Piché. It may be obvious to those in this room, but the benefit of everyone watching at home, why is it that one of the vendors is not Echo Energy?
Yes, we did. At the last time we went through this process, we did ask Echo to supply us some pricing, but they couldn't meet the supply that the city needs. They're more of a boutique electrical company or energy company, so they only offer for residential. They cannot meet the requirements for the city.
Thank you. I think it's important for people to understand that difference. They're still a very viable supplier for residences within the city, and we're certainly pleased with the response that there's been to date. However, there's always room for more customers, and they do contribute towards our community through the paying or through the funds that you pay on your bill each and every month. So let's hope that a little more public exposure increases their number of customers as well. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was just curious if there's another example of this in the city where we're making a decision for 2024. I mean, that's beyond our term, and I don't know. I guess I was wondering, is there any liability issues related to this, like that someone came back and said, what were you guys thinking for 2024? Just throwing that.
Certainly a good question, but perfectly reasonable answer for it, as Chief Gowdy will explain to you.
So certainly you are making commitments, but council makes commitments every time you borrow money or even set utility rates. You're making commitments as to what the municipality will collect in the future to run a viable system. And so the same is here. Now, we have looked at natural gas bulk purchasing in the past. Director Piche, would that be a similar process?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't reviewed those contracts as of late. That pricing isn't near what the electricity pricing is. We're usually around the $2.40 per kilojoule, megajoule, kilojoule, one of those per unit that we purchase on. And yeah, it's not as near. The electricity is a much higher impact for the city. The budget item for that is quite large at the end of the day.
That answer? Very good. Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So, I mean, so we're looking at significant savings by doing this?
Yes,
Compared
if
spot?
we were to just, oh, sorry, my Councillor Gullickson.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, if we're to do our spot pricing right now, we would be paying about $108 megawatt right now for electricity. If we're purchasing out 5 years in advance, we're able to secure our rate at that. And one of the things I guess I should point out on the pricing that's provided to you on that page 6. When you go to the quote for the 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year quotes, that's the length of term that we're going through, and that's what we stick at. So if we're going to go for a 3 year quote, that would be the 3 year quote for the entire 3 years, not quote year 1, year 2, or year 3. If we only go 1 year in advance for a 1 year agreement, we're going to be paying $1 or $2 higher than what if we go for a 3 year agreement in that sense. So I just wanted to point that out. So the further you go out into your bid pricing, so we try to go 5 years out, the lower your cost is going to be. The closer you purchase in, that's where your pricing is going to go up and up and up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I'm not a huge fan of buying in advance.
I think in fairness to the question that Councillor Gullickson put forward, he suggested, is that a cost savings? And I think that's not necessarily a certainty. However, having a constant reliable supply and a vendor certainly does offer some security in that regard, but the actual pricing, quite frankly, is a bit of an unknown. And you are taking, I don't necessarily want to say a gamble, but certainly there's an inherent risk with pre-booking, with the expectation that generally speaking, utility rates do not fall dramatically. But I think just for us to 100% say that this is going to be a cost saving, we certainly hope it is, but I think that's unrealistic to say that it definitely will be. Is that fair?
Yes,
Chief Governor?
that's very fair.
Is that a reasonable assessment in your opinion as well?
Yeah, that's the way I feel. Keen on. Did we have a?
Do we? Would anyone care to make a motion for this item? Councillor Ross?
I'll make that motion that council selects the following electrical vendors as preferred vendors: MX Energy, Direct Energy, Capital Power, and Campus Energy. Are those two separate motions, or is that all one?
No, I believe that is one motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ponik?
Just not that I pretend to know, I recognize MX and Direct Energy. I don't know Capital Power or Campus Energy. I'm just curious who they are and why Core, for example, didn't. Why was that?
Yeah.
Core
So Capital Power is actually owned by EPCOR, the City of Edmonton owned utility, and they focus on serving large commercial and industrial clients. And Campus Energy is formerly known as AltaGas, retail operations purchased by Birch Hill Equity Partners. And they focus as well on commercial and industrial clients only. They don't do any residential or small commercial clients.
Thank you.
So just to be transparent about this process, why is it that we want to limit it to these four? There's got to be some reasoning behind it, because I expect there are additional companies that would be interested in it.
We did
may or may not
already,
sort of-
so we already put out the RFP and we posted it on the Alberta Purchasing Connection already. So it was already out there since back in April is when it was posted, about the 21st of April. It was posted on the Alberta Purchasing Connection, which gave anybody and everybody the ability to bid on it. And these are the four that actually did bid and met the criteria. I don't think anybody who would have bid on it would have not met the criteria, because we lay out all of our volumes as well as our expectations of what they need to meet in terms of the administration side of it too.
Very good. That's precisely the answer I was looking for, because I expect we're going to have members of the public who would ask that very question, given that this is a fairly substantial commitment. The city uses a tremendous amount of power, and especially over those that many multiple years. So thank you for that explanation. So for the motion before us, does anyone have any additional input? Okay, then we'll vote. All those in favor? See none opposed. The additional considerations? Councillor Hoekstra?
Pulling it up here. Okay.
If I may, before,
Certainly.
just one clarification, motion says 2023, but the memo talks about starting 2024. Am I reading something wrong here?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, yes, I did make a mistake there, Councillor Koenig. I did mention that it should state 2024, January 1st, 2024. Yeah, I apologize for that.
I'm just going to jump in here. Yeah, if you're ready to proceed.
I move that council authorizes the CAO to execute a 3-year electrical supply agreement with the start date of January 1st, 2024, based on the best pricing available to the city from the preferred list of vendors.
Very good. Anything on that motion? All those in favor? That is unanimous as well. Very good. I believe that is all the RFPs that we have before us this evening. So we'll move into the information portion of the agenda. And CAO Gowdy, you have a report for us?
I do not. I was out of the office for the last week during the final preparation of the agenda, and so I did not prepare.
Great. And council mailbox. The National Indigenous Affordable Housing Corporation letter for 6.2A. Any questions on that letter? 6.2B, petition to bylaw 400.35 amendment. Behind us, but is there anything on that item? And then we have the Home Flying Club business plan for 2021. Councillor Ross.
Mayor Creasy, the paving project, I see the lines were painted today or Friday. Anyway, so the paving project is complete, so that was very significant. The airport, there was recently declined one for the like socks or something. But anyways, that was minor. I think the airport has undergone some very significant improvements in the past couple of years with cooperation with this county and the city and some provincial grants. So a lot of improvements, and yeah.
certainly positive news. However, I did hear from an item from the STIP program. In fact, it was denied on a much smaller.
Yeah, that was item what it brought up.
Pathway, running lights and a lighted wing sign.
Very good. I expect there's been lots of members of the public that saw the repaving or the additional lift of pavement on that runway last week, which was a fairly impressive sight. I don't think it's very often when we get to see 5 pavers side by side going through much like a harvest type, harvest fashion. It was impressive to see. I was there a little earlier in the day, and I understand that Chief Gotti was able to organize some video of the event, which I think will be valuable for us for communicating some of the work that was done out there. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Also had an opportunity to speak with the founder of the company out there, which was rather enjoyable and great to see Mr. Walls out on the job. I think close to home didn't help, but I think that he too was rather impressed to see his company out there with that much iron in one spot and doing a great job. I think they had to pull some crews in from, or at least one more additional crew from Red Deer, I think, in another location somewhere, but interesting to see in any event. Certainly, if there's any questions, just don't be afraid to jump in on these items. The Lacombe Police Commission minutes from May 20th. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks very crazy. I do have a question about, and I'm of course not able to find it now. Oh yeah, under the chief's report, it said there was a human rights complaint, but under Brad, is it Pears or Piers?
Pears, yes.
Had no complaints. What's the difference? I was curious.
I think that actually perhaps I should defer to Councillor Connick. I think I know the reason, but would you care to offer an explanation for that?
I think the CEO got it, probably better qualified to answer that. There is a difference. I don't want to be wrong.
The police complaint through Mr. Pears would be a complaint against a sworn officer about their conduct and enforcement of the Police Act. A human rights complaint could be about civilian staff. It could be something unrelated to the Police Act, and that wouldn't go through the police complaint process. It would go through a different.
I can say in this instance, someone was trying to, was not happy with current values, trying to see different values.
I'm sorry, with the current.
I think it went through PCV and that route didn't work very well for that individual, so he's taking a different approach, which I suspect will have some.
And certainly, I think that's important to note. If any member of the public feels that they did not get